Picture this, a live television debate that escalates so quickly the presenter has to literally shout stop, 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 stop like a referee breaking up a boxing match, except instead of gloves, they're wielding statistics, and instead of a ring, it's a news studio. Welcome to GB News, where a discussion about Labor's economic record just went from civilized debate to verbal cage match faster than you can say cost of living crisis. And honestly, if this doesn't sum up the state of British political discourse right now, I don't know what does. Grab your popcorn, because we're diving into the moment TV presenter Cristo Foufas and former Labour advisor Suzy Stride went absolutely head-to-head, leaving host Will Kingston scrambling for the emergency stop button. So let's set the scene. Will Kingston is hosting what presumably started as a nice, normal political discussion on GB News. You know, the kind where people disagree politely, make their points, maybe raise an eyebrow or two, and then move on. Except that's not what happened, not even close. What actually happened was Cristo Foufas decided to come out swinging like a political prizefighter who'd had too much coffee and a lot of pent-up opinions about Labour's economic policies. Cristo kicks things off by pointing out the delicious irony that trade unions, the very organizations that help finance and support Labor's rise to power, are now demanding that Labor solve the cost of living crisis. And here's where he drops the hammer. He says this is the same cost of living crisis that Labor has facilitated. Ouch. That's not just throwing shade, that's constructing an entire shadow infrastructure. He's basically saying Labour created the monster they're now being asked to defeat, which, if true, would be quite the political own goal. But Cristo doesn't stop there, because why would he? He's on a roll. He starts hammering away at what he calls the highest tax burden in history. And look, whether you think taxes are too high or just right probably depends on whether you're paying them or receiving the benefits. But the point is, this is a sensitive topic. People feel taxes in their actual wallets, which makes it very, very personal. Cristo then goes after what he calls the lies about taxes not being increased and the infamous black hole in public finances that Labour kept banging on about before the election. You remember the black hole, right? That mysterious financial abyss that apparently justified every difficult decision? Yeah, that one. Then he really gets going on the two-child benefit cap, saying they gave away money there, before delivering what might be the most British dismissive statement possible: get in the bin. For our international viewers, that's essentially throw it in the trash, but with more contempt than better delivery. He absolutely rages that Labour has created and made the cost of living crisis way worse, pointing out that inflation still hasn't dropped back down to the level it was when the Tories left office, which is quite the claim, considering the Tories didn't exactly leave office with the economy doing cartwheels of joy. His grand finale? Labour created this cost of living crisis, and now we have to listen to the very people who helped put Labour in power tell us they need to solve it. It's like watching someone blame the fire department for the fire, except in this case, the firefighters also allegedly supplied the matches. The circular logic is making everyone dizzy, but Cristo's on fire himself at this point, and he's not done yet. Now here's where it gets properly spicy, because Suzy Stride, former Labour advisor, has been sitting there listening to this entire tirade, probably feeling her blood pressure rising with every word. When Will Kingston finally gives her the floor, she comes out with what might be the most gloriously dismissive opening line possible. That is such utter rubbish, I don't even know where to start. No diplomatic preamble, no, well, I respect your opinion, but just straight to, this is rubbish and you're wrong. You've got to admire the directness, really. Suzy immediately zeroes in on Cristo's central claim that Labour created the cost of living crisis, and she asks the most obvious question: does he genuinely believe the cost of living crisis only started existing since last summer, when Labour took office? Because if so, she's got a bridge to sell him. She points out that a massive part of the crisis started when Liz Truss, during her spectacularly brief tenure as Prime Minister, issued what Suzy calls a barmy budget. And look, calling it barmy is actually quite restrained when you consider that Truss's mini budget crashed the pound, sent mortgage rates soaring, and basically caused economic chaos that lasted far longer than her actual time in office. She raged that mortgages went through the roof, which is not hyperbole. Actual mortgage rates genuinely skyrocketed, leaving thousands of families facing massive payment increases and economic uncertainty. Suzy makes it clear that she's not claiming labor has gotten everything right. That's important. She's not presenting labor as perfect economic geniuses who've made zero mistakes. But what she absolutely will not accept is the suggestion that labor somehow created a problem that definitively started before they even got into office. It's like blaming the cleanup crew for the mess at a party they didn't attend. Sure, maybe they're not cleaning it up as efficiently as you'd like, but they didn't throw the red wine on the carpet. But Cristo's not backing down. Of course he's not. This is live television, and he's committed to his argument like a captain going down with his ship. He starts going after unemployment figures on their labor, trying to prove his point that things have gotten worse since they took over. And this is where Suzy really digs in, because she fires back that all of those problems Cristo's citing, predated labor coming into office. She's essentially saying you can't blame us for inheriting a dumpster fire and not immediately turning it into a pristine garden. And this is the moment, the exact moment where civilized debate exits stage left and chaos enters stage right. Both Cristo and Suzy start raising their voices, desperately trying to speak over each other like two people having completely different arguments at the same volume. It's verbal combat, except instead of swords, they're wielding economic statistics and partisan talking points. Neither can hear the other because they're both talking, and the whole thing is spiraling faster than Liz Truss's approval ratings. Will Kingston, bless him, realizes this has gone completely off the rails. This is not the informed, measured discussion he probably envisioned when he woke up that morning. This is two people having what can only be described as an on-air shouting match about economic policy. So he does what any sensible presenter would do. He grabs his remote, raises it like some sort of magical peacekeeping talisman, and starts shouting over both of them. I'm going to stop. I'm going to jump in now. 5 stops. He said stop 5 times. That's how out of control this got. When you need to say stop 5 times in rapid succession, you know things have escalated beyond the normal bounds of television decorum. It's the broadcast equivalent of pulling the emergency brake on a runaway train. Will Kingston basically had to referee a political cage match in real time, bringing the debate to a complete halt before it devolved into complete chaos, and then swiftly moving the conversation onto literally anything else. But let's step back from the entertainment value for a second and look at what this actually reveals about British politics right now. Because this wasn't just good television. This was a perfect snapshot of the absolute divide in how people view Labour's economic performance. On one side, you've got critics like Cristo who genuinely believe Labour has made things worse, that they've increased taxes despite promises not to, that they facilitated or worsened the cost of living crisis, and that the current economic situation is directly their fault. On the other side, you've got defenders like Suzy who point out that Labour inherited a complete mess from the Conservatives, that many of the current problems have roots in decisions made before Labour took office, particularly during the Truss disaster, and that it's fundamentally unfair to blame them for problems they didn't create. And here's the thing. Both sides have points. Yes, Labour has increased taxes. That's factually true. They've made decisions that have been unpopular and have economic consequences. But it's also true that they inherited an economy that was already struggling, with inflation already elevated, with mortgage rates already problematic, with public services already strained. The cost of living crisis didn't magically appear in July when Labour won the election. It's been building for years, accelerated by various factors, including the pandemic, Brexit disruptions, energy price shocks, and yes, spectacularly poor economic decisions by previous governments. The problem is that nuance doesn't make for great television, and it definitely doesn't fit into a heated debate where everyone's trying to score points. What makes for great television is exactly what we saw. Two people passionately arguing completely opposite positions until a presenter has to literally shout them to submission. It's entertaining, it's dramatic, but it's not particularly enlightening if you're trying to actually understand what's happening with the economy. This moment also perfectly encapsulates the challenge Labour is facing right now. They're caught in the classic trap of governing. Everything that goes wrong is automatically their fault, but they can't get credit for anything that was improving anyway. They're dealing with structural economic problems that have been decades in the making, but voters, understandably, want solutions now. Not in 5 years, not in 10 years, now. People are struggling with bills, with mortgages, with the cost of basic necessities, and they want someone to fix it. Whether it's fair to blame labor entirely for that is debatable, but in politics, fair doesn't matter. Perception matters. And the perception, at least among critics, is that labor has made things worse, whether through tax increases, through policy decisions, through failing to deliver the growth they promised. The narrative has taken hold that labor is struggling economically. Meanwhile, labor supporters are pulling their hair out trying to explain Rome wasn't built in a day, and you can't fix decades of problems in months. But that message is a hard sell when people's energy bills are through the roof. What made this particular on-air explosion so compelling wasn't just about facts and figures. It was about emotion, about frustration, about fundamentally different worldviews colliding in real time. Cristo was genuinely angry about what he sees as labor's failures and hypocrisy. Suzy was genuinely furious about what she sees as unfair blame and historical revisionism. Neither was going to back down, neither was going to concede a point, and the result was television gold but political discourse disaster. The fact that Will Kingston had to intervene so dramatically says everything about where we are with political debate in this country. We've reached the point where people can't even discuss economic policy without it turning into a shouting match.